Let's take a look at a few of these things that are indeed going on. And we're going to start with news coming out from Moody's. Now, Moody's, if you don't know, is a credit rating and analytics group. Simply, they do a lot of things, but simply put, they provide analytics and credit ratings on companies, banks, governments, and the securities like bonds and loans and stuff, so that investors will know whether to buy, sell, or invest in those things. That's simply put what they do. Another important thing to know about these rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and there's some other ones out there as well, is that Moody's was one of the groups that helped prep the 2008 crash. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. We can't just take it at face value when we see things like this, but we have to understand that they are just another puppet in the rigged market that is out there. And as we know, the 07 through 09, because there was quite a bit there, was entirely planned and entirely controlled. I've talked about this before, specifically in the Tearing Down the Curtain episode that showed, they admitted it. There's an interview with George Soros where he admitted it right there during that time and said there's going to be a controlled crash or a de-dollarization. He didn't say crash, but a controlled de-dollarization, and China is going to lead that initiative. And that was the whole point of the 07 crash that they did, was to start that de-dollarization in order to help bring in this new system. I've talked about that before. I've shown the interviews and whatnot. There's other ones out there like Evelyn D. Rothschild and others that have admitted what's going on with that. So that was entirely planned. That was entirely controlled. That wasn't an accident. That was, in my opinion, the trigger point for this de-dollarization that we continue to see today. So that's something to definitely keep in mind on that. Now, Moody's are rolling out a brand new scoring system, a new credit scoring system that we should be aware of, because it is centered around, I bet you guys know what I'm about to say. That's right. Climate. Yes. A new credit system revolved around climate. As stupid as we know the agenda is, we still got to understand that it is intertwined into everything. They are using that as the main point to get this stuff done. I've talked about this in the past as well when it comes, that's what the Club of Rome, when they were sitting in the Rockefeller estate, which was a Freemason house over in Italy, that's what they were cooking up. How are we going to bring in this new financial system? How are we going to bring in this one world government? And how are we going to bring about this new kings and peasants or neo-feudalistic system? Well, we're going to center it around climate. And they admit it in a book that they made up that problem in order to unite the world, in order to get this agenda done. So as stupid as we know it is, we have to pay attention when they have this stuff wrapped in with all this. So let's take a look at this thing. It's called an NZA. It says Moody rolls out a new scoring system of companies' net zero transition plans. Oh, fun times to be had, isn't it? Credit ratings, research and risk analysis provider Moody's Investor Service announced the release of its Net Zero Assessment, or NZA. It's a new scoring system aimed at enabling investors to evaluate and compare companies' decarbonization plans and actions. It's just a fancy way for ESG. We'll get into that in just a second. Goes on to say officially launched last year, so 2023, the new NZAs provide an assessment of the strength of a company's carbon emissions reduction profile. So carbon credit, yeah, like social credit, that's exactly right, relative to a global net zero pathway consistent with the Paris Agreements. Wow, most ambitious goals, considering the entity's ambitions as well as its plan and governance around emission reductions. The NZAs utilize a 5-point scale from NZ1, which is the highest, to NZ5, which is the lowest. For the first NZA, Moody's assigned Italian energy infrastructure provider SNAM's climate transition plan with a score of NZ3, or significant, so right in the middle. with the company's ambition rating as well below 2 degrees Celsius. I'm not exactly sure how all that stuff works on that. So, but apparently it's consistent with the Paris Agreement goals and its implementation as solid, with its action plan on scope 1 and 2 emissions based on proven and easy to scale up technology, but partly offset by implementation hurdles of the emissions and all that stuff. So basically, they've created a new credit system, new social credit, carbon credit system to evaluate companies. And basically, you know how ESG, if you don't play ball, if you're not implementing what they want, investors will pull out and basically destroy your company. Well, this is a new fancy way of making sure that this happens the way that they want it to. And if you're not going to play ball, it's not going to happen. So let's finish this off. Where it says Brian Cahill, global head of ESG at Moody's Investor Service, says market participants confront considerable challenges in comparing decarbonization plans, that's weird, across companies because of inconsistent disclosure requirements, differences in the magnitude, coverage, and timing of targets, as well as differences in the capacity of firms to implement their business transformation plans and meet their targets. So ultimately, it goes on, but it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, what he's saying is because we have ESG scoring all over the map, these different companies and different investors who are looking at these companies and their plans, they're all scoring them differently. We need a centralized one system scoring bracket for this. And that's where the NZAs come into place. I just dropped my pen. Give me a second. It rolled away. So I'm going without my pen today. That's going to be interesting. I always need that to play with. Anyways, so ultimately, they need a centralized system in order to make this all happen. We always talk about the ESG like it was a failure. And I know there's a lot of stuff that was getting thrown around last year, probably mid last year. A lot of people on the right wing side of things that kept saying ESG was dead. It was failing. You heard some reports coming out about how even people like Larry Fink, who's one of the main guys behind this stuff, is pulling back on the ESG plans and stuff like that. No. And I think when I talked about that, I said that's not going away. Carbon is clearly what's going on because, as I talked about, they're building everything around carbon. They're building everything around climate. They're not just going to get rid of that main component because of things like, oh, well, it's failing and whatnot. It's not failing. It's the same reason why you continue to see companies continue to do the woke stuff. Nobody's cutting back on that, even though they lost a bunch of customers and whatnot. I talked about that too. I said, that's not going to stop it. They're going to continue to push forward with the plan that they want to because they don't care about your money. They really don't. Your money's worthless. That's why when we talk about, the system should have failed multiple times the past several years, well, that just goes to show that the money is worthless. So they're going to continue to push this forward. These rating agencies are told what to do, just like 07. And if you guys don't remember, that's when they were told to rate defaulting mortgage bonds built upon unpaid loans. So basically what happens is you have a bunch of mortgage bonds and securities, and they package them up into little boxes. And then the rating agencies look at those boxes and give them ratings. Well, it was a bunch of defaulted loans and a bunch of unpaid mortgages and all the real estate problems that were going on in 07. But yet the rating agencies kept rating them AAA, which, if you guys don't know, that is the highest rating that they can get. So that was the thing that was causing this unbalance that caused everything to fall. You had investors and banks and whatnot holding all of these things that were rated high ratings. At the same time, everything that it was built out of those was all failing because nobody could pay their mortgages and their loans and everything like that. And so that caused the unbalance, which caused the trigger. Well, those rating agencies were the ones that kept giving them good ratings when clearly they weren't. That tells you there was an agenda behind this. There was something going on. And the same agencies making these NZAs, which Moody's just did, was one of the main things behind the 07 crash on that. Ultimately, The bonds and securities should have been downgraded in their ratings, but because the collapse was designed to begin the de-dollarization, the rating agencies kept them rated AAA and top quality, even though they weren't. My point on this is while things on the outside, again, I always talk about we got to look below. I'm going to borrow the phrase because honestly, that's something that the Lord really placed on my heart was look below the surface of these things. The surface is this show. This it could look smooth on the outside, but it can be completely rotten on the inside, and that's what we see going on here. So when we see things like ESG is defeated and these woke companies are losing customers and all these things, well, Moody's is they're giving these high ratings for these things. That may be what we're seeing on the outside, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's showing what's going on underneath. And clearly, it's not. So while we heard ESG was dead, no, they just put out a brand new system to make it more centralized to make sure everybody's on the same page for ESG. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes, a lot more manipulation that I think people are willing to, maybe they just forget. I think a lot of it has to do with that is we just forget in the moment because we see something and without, just kind of stopping and thinking about, wait, okay, hold on. What do I know about this situation? We just kind of go with the flow. And I think a lot of that has to do with the wave of information that we get. We get a piece of information. We don't even get time to think about it before a new piece comes out. And I think sometimes we got to slow down for a minute. And we really got to think about what's going on, collect all the data that we can at that moment and really go, okay, what has happened before? What's really going on? What's the manipulation behind these things? And so sometimes we got to stop and look at that, not just go off of every single thing. I hope you guys understand what I'm saying on that. So yeah, we're looking at this and we go, okay, manipulative, controlled, rigged market credit agency created a new system for a centralized ESG scoring system. There's something going on here. Again, at this point, anything past that is speculation, which I'm not going to speculate on, because when it comes to financial stuff, there's absolutely no point in doing that. But that should give us an idea of really what's going on.